Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Brian Plays. As you can see on the screen, we are going to be playing one of the most classic games ever, Super Mario Brothers for the NES. I'll be playing on the Switch because I don't feel like taking out the old system and blowing into the cartridge. But here we go. Let's see how it looks. And it's a classic in every sense of the word. And this game was released in Japan in 1985. And it would come to America about a month or 2 months later. There's actually no official date of when it came out. Most people believe that it came out during the release of the NES, or maybe a month later, or a month or 2 months later. But there's debate whether it was a launch title for the system or not. I'm still getting used to these controllers because I have a big, bulky Switch controller right now. But this game is very important for a lot of reasons. It's a side-scrolling platformer. There really weren't that many side-scrollers back then. Ugh. This will take a while to get used to. But just imagine when this game first came out. Video games, there were plenty of systems out before the NES, but there were many problems at the time this game came out. Because it's 1985 now, right? Go back to 1977 when the Atari came out. And that was the king of the consoles back then. So it's 1977. Games started becoming mainstream. Of course, arcades were popular, but the Atari really started picking up in 1980 when Space Invaders came out. It kind of became the first killer app for a system. Basically, a killer app is basically a piece of hardware that actually sells the console. Like, this would be a killer app for the NES. Basically, you buy the system for that particular game. But eventually there was a video game crash in 1983. And pretty much the whole idea of buying video games was really left in doubt. Because in 1983, the video game industry was selling $3.2 billion and making that much money in revenue. 2 years later, it was only $100 million. So they lost about 97% of revenue, if you can believe that. And people would say, well, what happened? Why did video games stop selling? Well, after Space Invaders came out for the Atari, which later became known as the Atari 2600, there were several programmers that used to work for Atari. Atari made all their own games, so they pretty much were in control of the industry. But these developers were disgruntled and left, and they formed another company called Activision. And since they were familiar with how to program games for the Atari, they could easily make their own games, and it was a cartridge-based system, and they can use those cartridges on the Atari. And when they started creating games, these were good programmers, Atari was pissed off. They wanted royalties. And the reason why these programmers left Atari was because Atari games didn't have credits. They weren't given, like when you watch a movie, you see the credits roll by, or even a music video. There were no names of the developers who made the games for Atari. So that's why these people left. But, so Atari sued them But at the end, they came to an agreement that I know there's a warp here, but we're gonna try to do the whole game. So I'm gonna skip warps too in this playthrough. But anyway, they reached an agreement with Activision, which essentially, the Activision people had to pay royalties towards Atari, but basically the whole third-party setup was created. So with the success of Atari, you had many other systems coming out, like the Vectrex, the ColecoVision, and Television. Even I think Magnavox, the Odyssey 2 came out. But none were ever as popular as Atari. But now that you had all these third-party companies making video games, but they weren't as good as Activision. See, they had like capitalist ideas just to make money, not worried about the quality of their games. So basically, you had a bunch of games coming out every year for a bunch of consoles, and it pretty much saturated the whole market. And as a result, people would buy games, but they wanted good quality games. So the market underestimated all of the production that was going to come out in the early 80s. In 1982, I think sales were like 100% more than the last year. But Atari and these other companies would make so much more video games, so there wasn't as much of a demand. So a lot of money was wasted. Plus you had home PCs. PCs were becoming popular. And with the family computers, they had higher memory, which enabled better graphics could be implemented in the games. They had more space than the cartridges as well. So now you had the video game industry suffering. Too many games are out. The quality of the games suck. And people wanted to buy PCs. And two big examples of games that were failures was the port of Pac-Man. It was supposed to be a port of the arcade, and it just did not look good at all. It didn't feel or look like the arcade. And the other one was E.T. The makers of E.T., they just didn't have a good deadline, a long enough deadline to fix up the game, and the game was a bomb. And Atari would end up losing like almost 75% of their company, and even the arcades suffered. So with all this happening, by 1983, the video game industry had crashed. Even the word game had a negative connotation in the news at this time. And I remember that PC games were released, they usually called them like simulators instead of video games. So, this opportunity came up for in Japan, where they had the Famicom, to come up with a system. They were really taking a chance, because the Western markets they were fed up with video games. But the developers are smart, they came up with a great idea, and this is the game that you're playing now. Without this game, who knows how the future of video games would have turned out. I should really use the original controller. But everything for this game ended up working out perfectly. Like even the music, Koji Kondo, he was the the creator of the music, he was involved from day one. Usually, when they make a game, all the music would be made after production or before production. But in here, Koji wanted to orchestrate music that fit what the character was going through. Like when you go into the castle, the music is more tense. This has a more relaxed tone, or like a lazy, dreary tone for the water levels. So when this came out, it really saved the video game industry, and ended up selling, I think, like 40 million copies overall. It was the highest selling game of all time until, I think, Wii Sports came out. Yeah, so Nintendo was smart too. After the industry collapsed, you know, once the NES came out, the market just boomed all the way. By 1989, it had surpassed the highest level for video game revenues ever. And Nintendo was smart, but they didn't want to fall into the same mistakes Atari had made. They had the games that they made. They had a lockout chip, so that third-party companies couldn't illegally make games that would work for the NES, and that worked out for the most part. Of course, a lot of third-party companies, they had a lot of restrictions, like I mentioned in the Ninja Turtle video. Konami, you know, any third-party company could only make a few games a year, like 5 games. And that's where some companies had shell corporations come out, like Ultra. It was basically just Konami. So it's been a long time since I played this game. I might have played it just one time since 2000. You can get lucky and kill him if you have the flame. Now that's not supposed to be King Koopa. I believe those are King Koopas in disguise, and the real one would be in World 8. I believe the idea for the mushroom came about through the Japanese folklore that had a lot of stories about people entering forests and eating mushrooms and growing large from the mushrooms. That's where the mushrooms came from. And the developers, I should say Shigeru Miyamoto is the man behind Mario, and that they made a conscious effort to make you start the game as small Mario, so that when you did find the mushroom, it would be more gratifying and rewarding to see Mario grow. I find the springs very hard to control. As for the story about the Koopa turtles, I think that they were originally supposed to be ox, and when they designed them, Miyamoto said that it looked more like a turtle, so they kept the turtle design instead. I remember this being most likely the first game that I ever played. I mean, I can't remember, but I know I played video games when I was not even 2 years old, and I do have a picture of me sitting on a stool in Florida playing this game. You can see the TV, and I look so focused with the controller. And I had to be 2 years old, at least. But I also had a Commodore 64, which was basically one of the only consoles to survive the video game crash. That wasn't Nintendo. Commodore 64 was actually able to raise the price of its console a few years after the crash. And it actually did pretty well. I remember I had a lot of games for that as well. You know, a lot of them were kiddie games. I think I even had like Sesame Street games on them. There was one game with the, look at that. There was one game where I think it was like two clowns on a seesaw, and you would take turns jumping off each side, and you had to collect balloons. And my favorite game for the Commodore 64 was Wizards of War, which I might try one day. It's basically like Pac-Man in terms of the maze, but you're really shooting down aliens. It's kind of like Metroid and Pac-Man. Eventually, this game was so popular that you basically couldn't get an NES without having it packaged with the system. They had, there were copies of Super Mario Brothers, and it was paired with Duck Hunt too. And that game required you to have the Zapper, which was the NES gun, basically. I don't know why I'm getting all these blocks. This world is famous because it's the, you go to World 1-2, you take the warp to the World 4, and then I believe in 4-2 there's a warp that can take you right to the last world. Oops. On this controller, you can even control yourself with the analog stick, but I would not recommend that at all. These games were meant to be played with the D-pad. remember trying to break all these blocks, and yeah, there were occasional blocks like that. But you always had to contend with the time as well. That's where if you jump up here, you'll get a beanstalk, and that would take you to a warp. But I actually want to look at every level again. Every time you play a game like this, you always say, well, it's probably going to be the last time I'll ever play it. So you want to enjoy it. Usually you can walk on the ceiling. I believe if you finish the level with a certain number at the end of your time, you can produce fireworks. I don't really recall what they have to be, though. Every 100 coins you get an extra life. There was a poll that came out in 1990, and they found out that kids were able to recognize Mario more than Mickey Mouse. See, there's a firework. This game is known for pinpoint control. Playing it now, I haven't played a bunch of other games. It's a little slippery when jumping. Oh, perfect. This castle, you had to go a certain way, up or down. I got that on my first try. So these worlds are probably the most unfamiliar because people would normally just warp to the end. I think originally there was going to be flying parts to the game where you would shoot enemies in some kind of rocket ship, but the developers just couldn't figure out how to do it, and I think parts are left behind where when you go up in the beanstalk in the cloudy area, those were going to be reserved for the shooting areas. Whoa. No, I'm not sure if I'll finish the entire game tonight. It depends, because it's going to get harder. So once I start dying, I might call it a night. Those guys are the hardest in the game. The Hammer Bros. Oh, I hope this isn't a warp area. I don't think it is. Whoa, what was that? Whoops. Well, we did last a long time with the fire. And this game does offer variety that games didn't really have up until this point. And you got the regular Mushroom Kingdom levels, you got the treetops, the water levels, the caves, and the castles. This game was made side by side with The Legend of Zelda as well. These were going to be the big games that were released for the system, and they turned out to be some of the most popular. And, oh! In fact, that spinning flame thing was supposed to be in Zelda. But something was up, they couldn't get it. And it ended up being used for the castles. And I bet you when I was a kid I would have came back and got that mushroom pickup. I believe you can jump here. Yeah. Whoop! Now I'm gonna actually have to use some strategy here. Woo! I think it's a lot harder for people to go under him than jumping over him. I think it's easier if you stay grounded because once you jump in the air, you're committed. There's gotta be something here, right? Oh. Nope. Every coin counts, so let's see if I can get 4 more coins. Now, if I wanted to, This game has a save feature on the Switch. I could save every time I feel like I'm about to die. But I'm gonna try to be faithful to the original. We'll see if I save it, I don't know. I believe you can, if you get game over, I think they start you back at the beginning of the game, but you can press a certain button, or hold the button down and continue where you left off. I am not sure. I don't know. Huh. It's much harder than it looks. Eventually, as they made more Mario games, I don't remember so many areas here. Eventually, while they made more games, each world was even more distinctly. They had a distinct theme that was nothing like the previous worlds. You start to really see that in Super Mario 3. We had the Mushroom Kingdom, the desert, and then the water world. And this is supposed to be like a snowy level, I guess you could say. Whoop. Here we go. Alright. My hands are so shaky on this controller. It's ridiculous. This game taught you about jumping and the momentum you put into your jumps. I guarantee you the first time someone ever went on those platforms, they were shocked to be dragged down to the bottom of the screen. Alright. Like the last castle, we're starting to see the difficulty level increase. Ah. What do we do? What do we do? Oh! Alright, 2 more worlds. It's gonna get a lot harder. I guess after that amazing run, we can create a save point. Now we'll see what happens. Back then, actually in the future, I think that would have knocked out the build. Alright. Wow. Ah! Alright, I thought there would be something for me up there. Now, do I want to jump on this? That's unfortunate. I think if you just walk along the bottom, they can never actually touch you. But you gotta be careful. Wow. Who really likes bloopers? Okay, let's see. I don't remember how difficult these things are. And back then, those might have been like the hardest enemies people would face. And there we got the flying cheeps. Oh no! That's what happens when all your momentum is pushing you. Again! 3 times the charm, right? I would say this game is definitely the hardest of the first 3 Marios. Actually, it might be. I'm not counting the lost levels, but well, the Famicom version of number 2. This is probably the hardest Mario game. I mean, I know there's some levels in 64 and what do you call it? Galaxy that, you know, they push the limits. But overall, as an overall game, I think this could be the hardest. Alright. I'll save it here. We'll see what happens. This is one of those pattern rooms. Let's see, bottom, middle, top. Yes. Bottom, middle, maybe? Then bottom? Nope. I assume they want me to go for the difficult area. Bottom, middle, what's the top? No. Bottom. Maybe we gotta do top. Top. Maybe middle. Then bottom. No. Top. What do I do? Top, middle. Bottom. Did I just do that? Top, bottom. That was it? No. I don't even remember what I did. We started off with the top. Oh, okay. What did I do? I thought you would hear like a beep or like a sound if you messed that up. That might have been from Super Mario All-Stars, which is a great game because, you know, this came out 2 years before I was born, or actually just over a year before I was born. And, whoa. I played Mario 2. Mario 2 might have come out in 88. And I think 89 was Mario 3. But, you know, at that point I was like 2.5 years old. But, I think Super Mario All-Stars came out in 92, I believe. You know, so I was 5. Let's see what happens if I die. Where do I start? See, I don't know how to... They would start me from the beginning. I have to figure out how to, I gotta figure out how do I start from this world. Because it is possible. Because I know I didn't play the game from the beginning every time. Well, for now this is my option. But when, as I was saying, when Super Mario All-Stars came out, it was a chance for me to actually play all the games again. And they did have updated graphics. You know, there wasn't... It was very noticeable, but... You know, we weren't going from like 2D to 3D. But the games looked great. And why wouldn't you play them after, you know, playing the NES version? I think I pretty much stuck with the All-Stars every time I wanted to play these games again. So, you know, it's nice actually playing the NES version again. This level just keeps on going on. I believe I have a single to jump from. thought I did. Yes. That's hard. Bonus points for doing it backwards. This is difficult. You don't get a lot of time, right? Ta-da! Really need to get 23 more coins. I remember replaying this level a ton of times. From dying here and probably from dying in the next level. And having to start over. Oh. And I remember getting a chance every time. I can get this far, I can always get a life back. So it's almost like a free life if you can survive up to this point. Every time. I thought there would be a mushroom in there. Oh, good luck. Oh boy, this is gonna be tough. Wow. This is the game where I started getting an audience whenever I would play. We would be at home or at a friend's house. And I always remember everybody's reaction when you make these tight jumps. Like, oh, oh my. But it was fun. I loved having people watch me play video games. Oh my goodness. Sometimes you gotta think, what's scarier, the Doom game that I was playing, or these jumps? Now the next level is probably the hardest level in the game. Maybe until you get to the last level, right after it. It's all because of these hammer bros. I think there's a block here too. I don't know. It would be nice to know. Well, there goes my shot. We'll see what happens. I don't know, I always thought there was a block here somewhere. I'm sure I passed one over there. I knew I should have ran with it. Alright. I remember once. This is so hard. Ah, I thought he was gonna jump. Well, that's tough. Oops. I'm trying to figure out how to get to that world again. I don't know, it's a mystery. And hey, this is what it's going to be all about. Trial and error. And a little luck. That's why this game is so fun. Wow. It's like I was on ice. If I could survive the next wave. Whoa. He hopped it. What do you know? He hopped it. Oh, there's a block. I see it, but now I can't get there. I can't. Ah, I thought it would be something else. Why? It was worth a life, though. It was worth a life. I just realized. Alright. So we made it to the final. See what happens. I think we're making good time, too. Now, let's see. See where we can go with this. I don't remember this castle at all. It might have pipes in the air, yeah. I think I do remember now. It had a water part to it. I don't know if there's any secret blocks. I kind of wish there were. It's another maze, too. Yeah, apparently that was not the one to go into. Maybe this one is. Let's see. Ugh. Well, it's gotta be something in here, no? Alright. Oh, cheeps. Lovely. Water? Yes. If I could remember all this when I die, I can get back here faster. Because I know I'm going to die. Follow me. They're smart. The other one takes off in the other direction. Thanks. Alright. Oh, Hammer Brothers, too. Wow. And that's it. Congratulations. See, that was neat. So now when you play, you keep your high score, I believe. No, you don't. Alright, so that's my high score. Why am I beginning on World 2? Did I do the button thing? Did I actually figure out how to choose a level? But anyway, all the Goombas are now Buzzy Beetles. See? But you know, that's the game right there. One of the greatest games ever made. And a game everybody should play eventually. It's like they have the like 1001 albums you should listen to before you die. Well, this is one of the 1001 games you should play before you die, and it should be in the top 10. So, that'll be it for tonight. But I do want to show you the next game I want to play. It should be no surprise that it will be Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. This was the second Mario Bros. Game to come out. It was Mario Bros. 2 in Japan for the Famicom, but it would not make it to the US until Super Mario All-Stars, and I'll explain why in my next video. So we'll do that. Ever play Balloon Fight? Let's see. This is a game that also came out for the NES. I do not know if it was a launch title, but it was one of the first games to come out, so it might have been. It was in the black cartridge case, or the black box, which was famous for the early NES games. If anyone's ever played this, you would know the controls are like very, very, very sensitive. Whoa, that just whipped me out. Oh, there was more screen left. They didn't let me go though. I think if I go too low, a monster will eat me. Oh, you saw him? He tried to get me. This might be the furthest I've ever gone in this. That is it. Well, that wasn't bad. I was riding the coattails, my coattails of beating the original Mario. Well, that is all. Thank you for watching. And hopefully I'll be on tomorrow, and hopefully you will be on tomorrow, and you can enjoy another video of Brian Plays. Have a great night. See you soon.